Today, we're talking about what stops people from saving their marriage. There are some things that separate the successful couples from the couples that are not able to turn it around. When we were talking about this, because Danielle and I, we were actually having an organic conversation about this, like, what is the line? Because there's people that we talk to that we're not able to help. And the gap between couples who are able to resolve their issues and the couples who fall apart is actually not as big as we think it is. And it's not that mysterious. And surprisingly, it's not really about love or commitment. It's not about, how long you've been together, how many things you've come through. It's also not about your skill level or what you've learned, your level of insight. It's actually about 5 traits. They're mental stances. There's 5 qualities that really differentiate between the couples that can turn it around from the couples where they love each other, they've been together, they've read all the books, they've been to couples counseling, and then in the end, they just have to go their separate ways. That is a tragedy, in my opinion, when people really do love each other and they just can't break past that. But that's their biggest heart's desire. And it's really, they're shooting themselves in the foot, not even knowing that it's really about a certain mental stance that they can cultivate. So what we're going to talk about are the 5 things that these mindset shifts, these traits that are going to make all the difference in the world if you are on the brink.
Yeah, I want to reaffirm this is not rocket science. I think so many people often feel like, well, my situation's really unique and we have a dynamic that no one else has, or we have issues that no one else has. And that's honestly just not true. A lot of it is what we're going to talk about. And so I'm excited that we're going to break this down.
Once you recognize that a lot of it is actually internal and not about the tools you have already in your hand, it feels more accessible.
Yes. And you have so much more control over it than you think.
Exactly. Yes. So the first thing that I want to highlight, and you've probably already experienced this without knowing it, is that it's really tempting to say, well, it takes 2, right? If my partner's not going to bring their A game, if they're not 100% committed, if they're not going to join me in counseling, then how can I possibly make it work? Because it takes 2. But those who save their marriages are willing to go first. It starts with one individual in the couple that is willing to go first most of the time. And the reason why we encourage people to do that is because it's your goal, right? If you are somebody who's like, I want to turn around my marriage, I want to have a better marriage than what we have right now, the temptation is to think, well, why should I do that? Why should I go first? That's not fair. They're not doing the work. They're not reading the books. They're not wanting to join me. Why should I do it? And what I say to that is because it's what you want, right? You're just showing up in a way that's in alignment with your goals and values. And if you're doing that, you don't have to worry about fairness. You have nothing to lose, right? If you're showing up to support your vision and goals and you're in integrity with your life dreams, then what do you have to lose? You're letting scorekeeping get in the way. I hear that a lot. Like when people you say it takes 2, sometimes it's just because they don't know how much power they have just on their own to transform their marriage. But sometimes it is a little bit of a scorekeeping thing and a sense of injustice. And I get that. I had that too in my early marriage. I was really in a lot of resentment around the fact that I was willing to read the books and I was willing to go to counseling. And my husband did eventually join me in counseling, but it really wasn't his thing. And once I got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to go first because I want to clean up my side of the street and we'll see what happens, and be willing to live that question and be willing to go first. That's what transformed it. And I would say, gosh, what would you guess, Danielle? I mean, this is anecdotal because we don't actually have the stats on this, but what would you guess is the number or the percentage of clients that come into this work on their own? They start on their own and then their spouse joins them later. It's the majority.
Probably, it's got to be the majority. It's probably close to 90%.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I would say minimum would be like 65%, somewhere between 65 to 90% most. And granted, that's because we specialize in that and it's not a traditional model. And traditional counseling requires both people to show up together. Otherwise, you can't bill it as couples counseling. So, if you are going the coaching route, if you're going to go outside of a traditional modality, you have a much better chance of finding somebody who will help you relationally to save your marriage, even if your partner doesn't want to join you. I really just think that people do resist that going first thing.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people, when it comes down to the decision of getting help, it might even be that they're willing to go first, but only if they know what the outcome's going to be, or only if they know, yeah, my spouse eventually is going to come around, or they're eventually going to do the work too. And unfortunately, there's just no way to know that. Now we have very good, success with that. That's what we do. And so typically that is what happens. But there is a chance that your spouse may not be willing to do that with you, and you go through the whole program by yourself. What's important that you keep in mind is that you have an expectation for yourself. That is the only thing we can come to the table with, is an expectation of how I am now going to show up in my life and my marriage, and knowing that that's never a waste. So
absolutely. Well, that brings me to our second point anyway, which is that, and I feel like this is one of the biggest differences between success in marriage and failure, is the willing to go all in without a guarantee of outcome. And the reason why that's important is because you have to create, if you're on the brink, there's so much that's already happened that the narratives between you, the way that they're looking at you, needs to be changed before they're going to join you and say, I'm all in, I'm committed, let's do this, right? And so if you are requiring, it's backwards. If you're requiring a guarantee of outcome before you're going to go all in, well, then you're going to miss the opportunity to create the very thing that you need to create before they're going to want to come back and say, I see the changes you made. I see your intentions. I want to join you here. For example, if you are on the brink because you are in an emotional disconnection and your spouse is hurt and they're leaning out because they have felt invalidated or just not emotionally supported over the years, and you want them, let's say they're leaning out really hard and they're like, I just think I'm past the point of no return. A lot of times the temptation is to say, well, come back and I'll show you. But I think you have to show them first. When they're already in that state, they only have the information that they have that's based on the past. So your job in that case is to go all in to create a new narrative, give them new information, give them new data to work with, to change their perceptual filter, to change their understanding of what is possible, and then come forward and say, I will do this. So it feels scary to go. That's the definition of vulnerability, is to go all in on something when you don't have a guarantee of outcome. But if you can take that leap of faith, first of all, like you were saying, Danielle, you have to have a goal for yourself. Personal development is never in vain. Like, it's never going to be a waste of time. You're going to learn what you need to learn, health and healing and relational health that will have crossover in all other areas. But that counterintuitive, beautiful, magical thing is that when you're willing to take that leap of faith and build your wings on the way down, you could be amazed at their ability to be like, oh my goodness, I see it now. I see what you were trying to convince me of verbally. Now I understand it behaviorally. So if you can go all in on something before you have the guarantee, you have the opportunity to model and exhibit exactly what it is that you're trying to get them to see is possible. And sometimes we have to do this even in the context of an ambivalent relationship, or even a separation under the same roof, or even a separation under separate roofs, right?
Yeah, that's a huge distinction in terms of separation too, that I think comes up a lot with people that I speak to is, you've always said this, and I think it's brilliant, is there's a big difference between a therapeutic separation and a separation. And if you're in a separation, that could look like, we're just separated and that no one's working on anything. No one's making any progress. There's a big difference between that and then having help with a therapeutic separation where you are working through things. You're just separated while you're doing that, which we've had great success with people in therapeutic separations, but there is a big difference. And so just because you might be in that situation doesn't mean you can't turn it around, or there's no hope, or there's, not work to be done. That's important too, to remember that, you still have to take action. Like you can't just leave it and hope for the best. I appreciate
the distinction, because people get really hopeless when they look up separation statistics. The statistics show that like separation, I can't remember the number, but it's a very high percentage of people that enter into separation who end up divorced.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But that's because they're not therapeutic separations. So I think it's important for people to know that, so they don't get really hopeless.
And you can be in a separation and get help and turn it into a therapeutic. So it doesn't mean that you have to be therapeutic from the get-go. You can turn that around while separated. The biggest piece is having that pattern interrupt and showing up in a different way. And you can't do that if you don't know how. Like that's not something you can do on your own.
Exactly. And the pattern interrupt that happens with, we're going to live separately, well, we're going to give each other space and time. That's a great pattern interrupt for the nervous system. And it's a pattern interrupt for the playing out of the same old stories. But unless you do the work, the inner work, then when you do come back together, and I've talked to so many people where they're like, we had counseling, we were separated, and then we decided to give it one more try. But they didn't really do the inner work. So when they came back together, the old story was still going to win in the long run. So you have to really prepare, because it's not time and space that makes the changes in and of themselves. It has to be the actual transformation that's happening on the inside that will yield the change when you come back together. So that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah.
But what you were also saying, Danielle, is that you have to take action, right? So I want to piggyback on that, because the third thing I wanted to talk about, and I think this is one of the biggest traps for couples on the brink, is the difficulty in taking action that moves you out of your comfort zone. The reason why people have a hard time taking action is because it's going to be uncomfortable. It's like, I don't know, it feels unknown. And if you're going to save your marriage and you're on the brink, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing to leave your comfort zone. You have to be willing to hear where your blind spots are. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to be witnessed around where you're struggling, where you don't have the answers, challenge the ways that you're thinking about things that have inadvertently shot you in the foot, right? Because we all have blind spots. And I always use this analogy. If you're in the painting, you can't see the painting. You have to be outside the painting to see clearly what's really going on. So by leaving your comfort zone or the willingness to be uncomfortable, you're opening yourself up to hearing things that are going to make a huge difference to you. But it's hard because sometimes we feel, and we're going to get into this in the last one, we feel embarrassed or we feel like we should know this stuff, which is really silly. I mean, in the realm of relationships, nowhere do people expect so much from so little, in the sense of like, I'm just going to go learn a couple tips and then I'm going to learn relational health. If it wasn't modeled, if it wasn't taught to us, how are we supposed to know it? Any other area, like if we're going to improve our health, if we're going to make changes to, what we eat and why we're eating it, and if we're going to make changes in our career and we're going to have to learn a skill set to advance in an area that we need to advance, we have to learn this stuff. We have to take classes, or we have to do certifications or get mentorship or read all the books and then practice it, right? And actually have like practicum. It's not just intellectual. You have to put it into motion, and that's uncomfortable.
It is. And I think a big, uncomfortable can look different for a lot of people, and it can mean a lot of different things. So yes, while you're doing the work, of course, it's going to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing to be out of your comfort zone. But what I find really interesting is most people, the hardest part for them is actually the uncomfortableness of making the decision to get help. And there's so many things that come up for them. It could be, I don't want to invest the finances. I don't want to do this without getting permission from my spouse. I don't want to, be uncomfortable and not know if this is going to work 100%. And there's uncertainty there. And so we have patterns. We all do it. We all have patterns of decision making. And sometimes we can get really stuck in that. And so the very thing that's keeping you stuck is actually how you typically make decisions. And that can look like, I usually get someone else's buy-in or permission, or I want them to kind of reinforce that this is a good decision, or, it might be, I never, invest money without my spouse knowing, or things like that. And so there's a lot of different things that can come up for us. But the most important thing here is being decisive and taking action while uncomfortable is the only way you're going to get help. It's the only way to move forward. It's the only way that you're going to change your life and your marriage, is if you can get past that pattern that you have. Another one is people get really comfortable in research. They want to research all the things. They want to watch all the videos. They want to, they ask me 1,000 questions about our team and who's helping and what's, where we do this and how we do that. And that's okay to an extent. It's okay to know those things, but it can't be what you're basing your decision off of. This is a very internal decision of, I know I have to get the help, or I'm not going to save my marriage. And that's really what it comes down to. So I hate when people get stuck in that. It's honestly heartbreaking for me, because I know they're right there and they're so close to getting help, but they let their old patterns decide for them. And then they end up stuck.
The very ways of thinking that got them stuck are the same. It's the same paradigm they're using to decide to get help. And I believe people should shop around. I believe 100% people should
Sure.
find who they feel really comfortable with. But in
Mm-hmm.
the end, I really strongly encourage people to be willing to get the help, no matter, like, choose who's
Yes.
right for you, but don't try to do it alone. And so I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that willingness to get help is sometimes part of pride. It's part
Mm-hmm.
of, I should be able to do this by myself. I think maybe there's also an underestimation of the skills of relational health. And so people think it should be easier than it is. But I do think that for people that are on the brink, and they've been on the brink for a very long time, if they could do it on their own by now, they would have, right? They
Mm-hmm.
absolutely would have.
Mm-hmm.
But successful people, they recognize that they have blind spots. Successful
Right.
people recognize that they don't know all the things, and that they are really willing to hear where they might have those blind spots, like we talked about before. That they're willing to get input from people who have gone before them, who have paved a similar path, who can see the pitfalls ahead, that can understand how to win at this, that know exactly experientially what is difficult, what are the areas to focus on, what are not the areas to focus on, and when, right? Everybody that's leveling up in life has to have an intelligent plan of action, and
Oh
has
yeah.
to find where the information is that's going to serve them. And then also the mentorship piece, the willingness to have somebody that's holding you accountable is really important in my experience.
Yes.
Most of the time when I have decided I'm going to learn something new, I won't hold myself accountable until I've actually, like, decided to draw a line in the sand and be like, I'm investing
Right.
in this, and and I've hired coaches myself, and I have showed up in a very different way as a result of that, because
Yeah, you
I've
have to have
invested in
skin in the
myself.
game. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to have there is sacrifice to this, and that's just what it is. There's either sacrificing your marriage because you didn't get help, or there's a sacrifice of maybe time, finances, being comfortable, whatever that looks like for you. You're going to sacrifice either way. You
Absolutely.
are. And so you just kind of have to pick your heart and decide
Yeah.
what's worth it in the long run for you.
Yeah, that also reminds me, Danielle, of, this is something I've noticed, because this is obviously our line of work, and I'm sure you've noticed this too,
Sure.
that people they're not used to thinking about a marriage as something to invest in. Remodeling their kitchen, or going on a trip, or taking a class, or there's
Their kids'
all
education.
kinds of,
Yeah.
or the wedding. Let's spend $25,000 on a
Right.
wedding. But when it comes to 25 years in their marriage, and it's on the brink, and they're thinking that that's not just the same, and in terms of importance, is a cultural failure, I think. I think
Oh,
that we
agreed.
celebrate the getting married, the happily ever after starts
Yep.
when you're married. Like,
Yep.
that's how the movies end, right? When they're married, that's it. Now we
Right.
can all breathe easy. But it's like, well, no, you've just started. Now is when it really starts. And so the trick is, how do we set ourselves up for the long game? Longevity is going up. Marriage is, if we want to stay married for the rest of our lives, marriages are lasting a lot longer now. When you think about longevity going up, and how many more people are living to be 100, it's a long proposition.
Yeah.
And we change and we evolve. And as we change and evolve, and as the stressors increase and we go through things, our skills have to up level to meet us where we're at. And what worked for us in the beginning of our marriage isn't working for us anymore. So,
Right. The more you know, the better you are. And also, a lot of these people that I talk to have young families, they have kids, they still have kids at home. And that's one of the biggest investments you can even make for your children, is to have a marriage that is healthy.
Absolutely.
And to show them, even, I would say it's even a bigger gift to show them, look where we came from, because kids know, their kids are smart. They know things are not
they can see
well.
the before and the after.
They totally know. And so for them to see the before and after is such a huge investment as well. That's one of the biggest gifts we get to see, I think, on a consistent basis, is families. And it's not just about your marriage, but the legacy that you're now able to give your children is that's really priceless. I mean, there's nothing, in my opinion, that you could invest more in than your family.
That's the truth. And I think that's what our clients love the most too, is they realize the crossover, not just in their own families and future generations, because part of this work is facing trauma and dysfunction and codependency and all the things that you might have learned that you have to unlearn, and then learning the new things, right? What a blessing that is, to interrupt those generational patterns and to see healthier futures. It's my favorite thing. The last thing I want to mention is that I think what most people don't realize is that when you're going from being stuck inside a marriage that's not working to full inside out transformation, you have to make the health of the relationship more important than the person that you're with. I know that feels a little bit confronting in a way to think about. Like, even as I'm hearing myself say it, I'm like, that doesn't sound appealing, because most people are like wanting to save their marriages because they love their person and they want to be with their person. So it is about the person, but sometimes we have to take a stand for our marriage and for it being healthy over the person. So this really applies to a situation where you have boundaries you have to draw. Let's say your spouse is dealing with a precondition. We don't always know that ahead of time, right? You might have to hold boundaries around, certain behaviors that are not working, certain toxic communication. There might be times where you have to say, I'm so committed to our marriage to be healthy that I'm willing to focus on the skills I need, even if it means that I don't end up with you. So this isn't a situation where you're growing and you need to grow for the relational health of yourself and the family, and your partner won't join you. If you can still go first and all the things we talked about, right? Leave your comfort zone and go all in and everything, and you're doing it on your own. So often the spouse who never would have initiated that will end up joining you. But if they don't, in the end, what you have is relational health. And I did this in my marriage. I was like, the relational health is more important, even more important than my husband, even though I wanted that with him and nobody else.
Yep.
But when I really held the line on certain things, it's like, okay, well, that's the way forward. That's the way forward. And sometimes you are the catalyst. You are the one that will pivot your entire trajectory in the direction that you need to go in. And it could be the wife, it could be the husband. It doesn't matter. It just, as long as the person who knows that they're ready to clean up their side of the street, if they're willing to be a catalyst for that pattern interrupt and try to set a new foundation for marriage 2.0, basically, then
Yes.
I think that's so important to keep in mind. What kind of relationship do you want to have? That's where you really come into your vision. And I know you guys have heard me talk about this before, but what is your vision? And what is the most important thing for you in your relationship? What is the experience you're trying to create? And who do you need to be to show up to create that experience? And that mental stance is incredibly catalyzing and transformative and inspiring to your partner. If there's a chance that your partner is going to meet you in a healthier place, that is very compelling.
It shifts the energy that you show up in. So when you're bringing a different energy to your relationship, most of the time that's going to be recognized by your spouse, and they're curious. They want to know what's different. Why are you having a different response? Why does this feel different? They may not be able to verbalize that, but they can pick up on the energy that you are giving. And the only way to get there is to figure out, what are your beliefs? What are your triggers? Why do you show up with that energy? Why do you struggle with boundaries? How can we implement that? And so there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes. And I was talking to someone today that they asked me a really good question. They said, what is hard about this? Like, what if I do this, what's the hardest part? Which is so funny. I've not ever had someone ask me that, but I thought it was such a good question. And I told them the hardest part is the patience. Like, the work is the work, right? Like, we all have to do it, but the patience can be hard to know that you're doing the work and you're waiting for your spouse to notice. And so that's really where you have to decide. And that's where the decisiveness really comes in, is I'm doing this either way, whether or not my spouse notices, whether or not I can turn this around. I have to do this so that either way I can hold my head high, knowing that I did everything that I could do. That's really the sweet spot of this. And I think it ties into that of like, their relational health is more important than the person, because either way, you are going throughout the rest of your life relationally healthy. So you're taking this into your relationship with your children, with coworkers, with everyone you come in contact with. This matters. And it's applicable to all situations and all relationships at the end of the day.
Yes. And people never regret it. They never regret the work that they did. So just to summarize, the things that really separate individuals and couples who are stuck and have been stuck for a very long time, they go from stuck to turning it around. What separates those people from the folks that are stuck and end up just petering out because they just can't get to the other side? There's 5 things. Number 1 is moving out of the it takes two mentality and the willingness to go first. Go all in, do what you need to do, clean up your side of the street. It's your goal. Don't worry if it's not fair. If it's your goal and you're showing up to support it, you got nothing to lose. Number 2 is the ability to go all in without needing a guarantee of outcomes, because you recognize that the things that you have to do to yield the actions that you are seeking or the commitment that you're looking for in your spouse, that you're willing to do those actions first and magnetize them back into the relationship to do the inner work, right? Personal development is never in vain. So just be willing to go first and be willing to let go of any guarantees of like what your spouse will or will not do. Recognize the value in the work in and of itself. And paradoxically, when you do that and you just kind of like don't worry about them and you do that, they sort of, like Danielle was saying, they'll get curious and be like, what's going on over there, right? And it really works in your favor. The third thing is that you have to be willing to move out of your comfort zone, right? Willing to be uncomfortable as a choice. I'm going to be uncomfortable for a little while because that's required for me to get to a better place. Then you also have to make sure that you make the relational health of your relationship more important. So the quality of your connection, the health of your communication is more important than the person, meaning that you will take a stand for it to be good. You will not settle for anything less, because what's the point of being with the person you want to be with and having it not be good? That's not protecting the relationship. And then finally is your willingness to get help and to move out of pride and the willingness to say, I'm not going to drag this out. I'm not going to DIY this until the end of time. I'm not going to dabble here and there. I'm going to get some kind of support that works for me and be open to my blind spots and be willing to be course corrected and really go into like to be humble and coachable. That's a really important quality that you have to have if you're going to save your marriage. Because if you've been together for more than 20 years and you've been stuck for a few years, it takes Herculean effort to break out of that. The force of those old patterns is 10 million times more powerful. And that's actually scientifically true, if you haven't heard.
Yes, absolutely. And we've had people who come to this, and you come every week, and it's funny because there's so many people that'll ask the same question over and over, or they're stuck in the same patterns. And it's because they haven't taken action. They haven't gotten someone to help them. So they're still trying to piece together information, or maybe if I just get this one little nugget, that's going to completely turn my marriage around. And it just does not work that way. There's so much more that goes into this in terms of accountability and troubleshooting, helping you through different dynamics that you have going on. It's much more complicated than just getting some tips here or there and answering some questions and then, hoping that's going to turn your marriage around. It's just not reality.
Yeah. And I wish that wasn't true, honestly.
Yeah,
like,
same.
When I think about all the things that I went through in my early marriage, I wish that wasn't the case. But because I could see how much the traditional counseling model really misses the need for higher supports, more support in between the sessions, the importance of community, the willingness to work with just one person until the other person is ready. Those are things that I think you should definitely look for. Those are things that if you are looking for a program, if you are looking for mentorship, make sure you find somebody that offers those things, especially if you're on the brink. If you're not on the brink and you have a little bit of time and you're not on this window of like, it's make or break time right now, then that doesn't apply. But if you're in a place where it's like make or break right now, then you don't really have a lot of time to drag it out. And once a week for 50 minutes or every 2 weeks for 50 minutes, just scratching the surface and then doing it again next week with nothing in between it's painful to watch, because I've been through that. I've been the counselor in that situation. That we trained in that traditional way, because I was trained in this, and I've been the client in that situation. And so from both sides, I really do understand it's not to diss traditional counseling.
No,
it's just not designed. It just doesn't get very good outcomes. And
you're not getting the momentum.
Couples in crisis because of the nature of because of the insurance and needing both people to come at the same time.
Right. And also I would say, you can be in a spot where it feels like we have some time. And often what's heartbreaking about that as well is that's really not true. So there's a lot of people that are in marriages that think, oh, I have time to dabble. I have time to kind of figure this out. And I talk to so many people that, my wife just told me she wants a divorce and I didn't listen. She's been telling me for 6 months that she's unhappy. I didn't really take it that seriously. Now we're having a divorce conversation. So that's not great either. We don't want people in that situation. If you're starting to research this stuff, more than likely you deep down know that you need help now. Most people don't get to this point just for fun where they want to learn about this and they, it's kind of interesting and they're curious about it. Most people are here because they know their marriage is at a crisis point. They just don't know what to do about it, or it's scary to admit that, or it's vulnerable to say it out loud, which we totally understand. And that's why we're here, because we want to be able to help you turn it around quickly and not past the point of no return, because that is a thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And towards that end, if anybody is wanting to explore us as an option, if you are exploring mentorship, if you are exploring programs for your marriage, you can book a call with us. It's free. It's no obligation. It's monikahoyt.com/talk. And we can just have a better understanding of what your dynamics are. If it is a precondition, we wouldn't invite you in. We have to make sure it's a fit. Otherwise, it just wouldn't be ethical. So we do have to kind of screen and make sure that it's a situation that we can help in. And then you also get an opportunity to find out more and learn a little bit more to see if it's a fit for you as well. That's it for today. If you like my content, please take a second and either like this video or subscribe to my channel, or both. That will help us reach the people that really need to hear this stuff.